So over the past weeks and months, I've gotten multiple questions regarding spray guns. So I thought it would be advantageous to come out in the garage, get some spray guns, and just kind of walk you guys through what the heck the difference is between a $35 spray gun and a $350 spray gun. So we're going to go through each one of these, and I'll kind of take you through the features and some of the differences from, like I said, cheap to the most expensive. Going forward throughout the video, I'm going to refer to these as undercoating sprayers because YouTube does not like the three-letter G word. So I'm afraid if I keep saying that word over and over and over, it's going to put this video, it's going to demonetize the video, put the video into some sort of purgatory where it's never going to be seen. So I'm going to refer to these as undercoating sprayers. So if you hear some weird cuts in the edit, that's because I keep referring to them as the G word and not sprayers. Okay, so the first thing I really wanted to talk about before we really dive in and start talking about any of these sprayers was air requirements. Every one of these is ran by compressed air. You will need an air compressor and an air hose to operate any one of these I have behind me. And one thing I want to talk about is what size compressor you actually need to run one of these. In my guesstimation, I've never tried one this small, but this is just based on previous experience. You could probably get away with a 10-gallon or larger compressor to use with any one of these sprayers. When I started out spraying fluid film 5 years ago at this point, I was using a 20-gallon, 110-volt compressor. I had absolutely zero problem. It ran maybe 30 or 40% of the time. It wasn't at 100% duty cycle. The other thing you have to remember too is I'm doing this on a lift. So when I'm underneath the car, I can just walk around and just spray the whole bottom of the car, right? If you guys are doing this on jacks and jack stands, typically what you're probably going to do is spray an area, let go of the gun, you're going to crawl over somewhere else, pick up the gun and spray again. Well, when you're not pulling the trigger, that compressor is going to be building up air again. I'm a little bit more demanding on an air compressor because I can just walk around and hold the trigger and coat the whole bottom of the car. And like I said, I was doing that with a 20-gallon with no problems. It wasn't even remotely close to maxing out the 20-gallon. As far as the air pressure that you're going to need for any one of these sprayers. So it depends on the product that you're spraying. So for example, Surface Shield is a little bit thinner product than what Woolwax is. So typically when I spray Surface Shield, I spray it between, let's say 40 and 60 PSI. Generally speaking, we'll call it 50. When I spray Woolwax, I spray it at about 80 because it's a thicker product. Fluid film is going to end up in the middle somewhere. What I have found is if your air pressure is too low, the product doesn't atomize correctly. So it ends up sort of like splattering out of the gun and it doesn't really atomize like you want it to and just sort of flow out onto the car. If the pressure's too high, it atomizes too much and it sort of like lingers in the air. So you get about 75% of it goes out onto the car and another 25% of it is just sort of hanging around in the air because the particles, because the pressure is so high, the particles are just super, super fine. So 10-gallon compressor, really don't need more than 80 PSI if it's, a reasonable temperature outside, and you won't have any issues using any one of these sprayers. All right, so this is the absolute base entry-level sprayer that you can get on Amazon. This is the cheapest one that I could find as a complete sprayer. So what I mean by that is, yes, there are a bunch of them on Amazon, like some of them are like 15 bucks. But they don't come with the cup. So this cup down here on the bottom, they only come with this part on the top. And unless you know what fits the sprayer that you're buying, it's not going to do you any good. This was the cheapest one that I could find that was a complete sprayer. This was 35 bucks and it's okay. As you'll see, this thing does have some limitations, but there are some adjustments to it. So you can thread the tip in and out. They claim that that's an adjustment. They also claim that this screw on the back is an adjustment. I played with both of these. I did not see much of a change on how this thing actually sprayed product. Taking this, fully in to fully out, I saw no tangible difference. The other thing you have to remember about this sprayer is there's no inner cavity adapters for this sprayer. So inside frame rails, inside rocker panels, up in bedsides, places like that. You don't have anything for that. So the only option you have at that point is an aerosol can with an inner cavity adapter. Well, at that point, why even buy the gun? Just use the aerosol can with the inner cavity adapter, get rid of the air compressor, the air hose, and the sprayer, and just use the aerosol cans at that point. To me, yes, it'll work. Financially, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So the next sprayer we're gonna go over here is made by PMT. This thing sent me back $62.50 currently on Amazon, and overall it's actually a clone, or I should say it's a copy of the Woolwax professional sprayer. The reason I say that is the gun bodies themselves are exactly the same. So from here down it's PMT, and from here up it's identical to the Woolwax gun. The tips interchange, all the Woolwax cavity wands thread right into the end of this thing. With that said, there is a lot more adjustability with this particular sprayer than what there is on the TCP that we just talked about for 35 bucks. So the end of this, you can thread the end of this tip in and out that adjusts the product flow, how much product comes out of it, in addition to the air pressure coming into the base of the gun. Overall, it's a decent gun, still kind of lacking with the you know, the inner cavity wands and things like that. But like I said, the Woolwax inner cavity tools do work with this gun. It's a good cheap alternative to the Woolwax gun if you want something a little bit cheaper, but you still have to find a solution for inner cavities and inside frame rails, things like that. So guys, out of any spray that we're going to talk about in this video, this one is still by far my favorite one out there. This is the Woolwax professional spray gun. I've had this thing over 5 years at this point. I have put an absolute ton of product through this thing. I've had absolutely zero issues with it whatsoever. There are a few things that I don't like about it, which we'll go over in a second, but we'll go over the good stuff first. So this is an Italian-made sprayer, just like the PMT. I'm sure they come out of the exact same factory. This one just has a different finish on it. I know the tip in this sprayer will fit in the PMT. The extension hoses from the Woolwax gun will fit in the PMT. There's no doubt in my mind that the sprayer bodies are the exact same. A couple of the things that I like about this, like I said, it does come with inner cavity adapters, which is, you know, huge, because then you can finally get away from using aerosol cans, which is ultimately, you know, a cheaper way to go. The other thing is it comes with multiple bottles, and the nice thing is about multiple bottles, if you are a DIYer and you don't have a lift like I do, you're crawling around underneath the car. I get it. The nice thing is what you can do is you can fill all three of these, crawl underneath the car one time, spray all 3 bottles, and then come out when you're done. Typically, you won't use 3 bottles on one vehicle. It has to be something massive for you to use 3 bottles, like a 3/4 1-ton truck maybe. All these other sprayers that we're going to talk about, they only offer 1 bottle. So that means when this bottle's empty, you have to crawl out from underneath the vehicle, fill it back up, crawl back underneath the car. Whereas this setup, you fill all 3, put them right next to you underneath the car. When one's empty, you thread on the new one and just keep going. You don't even have to get out from underneath the car. The other nice thing about having multiple bottles is heating the product. So some of these products like Woolwax and fluid film, when it gets cold out, you have to heat them up. That's the only way that they're going to creep and sort of flow correctly and spray as well as they should, is by heating it up. The way I heat all my products up is what I do is I'll take a 5-gallon bucket, fill it full of hot water, put the lid on one of these bottles, and just put the bottle itself in the hot water and just let it sit there while I'm spraying another bottle. So when this bottle's empty, these 2 are sitting in the bucket of hot water and they're ready to go. So for that, having multiple bottles is kind of a big deal if you're a DIYer. The only thing that I can really knock this setup for, and I've seen other people have issues with it, and mine are starting to get to this point, are the tips on the wands. So if you look, there's no clamp on the brass into the plastic. And what happens is they start to get loose. So like I put a zip tie on that one to try and hold it together. It's just getting worn out, and the fitment between the plastic and the brass really just isn't that good over an extended period of time. It's eventually, they do come apart. Woolwax does offer replacement extension wands and hoses and things like that they offer on their website, but overall for $100, guys, this setup's really hard to beat. All right, now at this point, to me, this is when the wheels start to fall off as far as pricing is concerned. So this is the Woolwax Supreme Undercoating Sprayer. This is a much more like prosumer, if you will, style sprayer. It's gonna set you back $250. It is not cheap by any means, but it does have some more features that we're gonna talk about and go over real quick. And this is sort of common between all the more prosumer or professional style sprayers out there. So starting down here on the handle, comes with a regulator that you can regulate the flow right at the gun. You don't have to add that on your own. It has a 2-stage trigger like a traditional professional style paint sprayer. So the first section of travel right here, this is just air. And then when you pull the trigger the rest of the way, you get the air and the product. So like I said, it's just like a professional paint sprayer in that regard. In addition to that, there's also adjustable airflow rate and product flow rate here on the back of the sprayer. So depending on what sort of viscosity of product you're spraying, you can really sort of dial in and get the correct pattern that you want for the sprayer itself. Is it really necessary? Yes and no. It's one of those things that once you have it set and you have it set where you want it, typically you're not going to screw with it ever again, especially if you're spraying the same product all the time. In addition to that, it also has a quick connect on the end. So this is a more professional style inner cavity wand. If you look, this will swivel, 360 without rotating the tube itself. So you can stick this, up in any hole in the chassis, the frame, the body, whatever, spray inside all that stuff, and get the product inside like you need to. There's a few things though I don't really care for about this gun, and let me sort of explain for a minute. So all these sprayers that we've looked at up until this point all use vacuum to pull the product up and out of the containers. So they literally use the Venturi effect to create vacuum up here in the top of the gun, and then create a vacuum in this tube, and that pulls the product up into the sprayer and sprays it on whatever you want to use. The way that this sprayer works is a little bit different. So this is, like I said, a pressure pot. So essentially, the way this sort of works is when you pull the trigger, it sends air into this container, it pressurizes the container, and the fact that the container is pressurized is what pushes the product up the straw. This is where, to me, the issues start. So first of all, the fitment of the cup. For $250, the threads on the cup do not match well with the threads on the gun. You can see how that product that's around the threads there sort of looks gray. That's metal particles because the fitment between the gun and the cup is pretty poor. The next thing is when you're actually spraying this. So like I said, when you pull the trigger on this sprayer, it pressurizes this container, and that's what sends the product up the straw and out the end of the sprayer. When you release the trigger on the sprayer, it vents all of the pressure in the pot. So when you release the handle, you get a bunch of air escaping out the end. Ordinarily, not a big deal. If a little bit of air leaks out of this thing, I really don't care. My issue with it is when I release the trigger and I go to pull the trigger again, it takes literally 2 seconds for this pot to pressurize again before product starts coming out. So if you're underneath the vehicle and you're on and off the trigger constantly, each time you're on and off the trigger, it's going to take 2 seconds before the product actually starts coming out of the end of the sprayer again. Super annoying. So to show you guys what I'm talking about with this Woolwax Supreme sprayer, 80 PSI, air flows all the way out. Product is all the way open. So far open as it'll go, far open as it'll go, 80 PSI, watch. There it is. You hear the air bleeding off? It shouldn't take 2 seconds to build up pressure for the product to come out. When I pull the trigger, product should be coming out. This is what I'm talking about, guys. And let me go to another sprayer real quick just to show you what I'm talking about. $100 Woolwax Pro Sprayer, watch. For $250, you should not be waiting for product to come out. I'm sorry. You need to go back to the drawing board on that one, Woolwax, because for 250 bucks, this thing should not be outperforming it. The fact that this does not hold pressure all the time is why it's doing what it's doing. So to me, overall, I really can't get behind this thing, because for 250 bucks, it feels like I paid to be a beta tester for this thing. Like I said, this thing's only been on the market like 2 months at this point. I'm sure that going forward, they may or may not make changes to it. It sprays okay, but for the price that you're paying, it's not 2.5 times better than their standard Pro gun. All right, so the final sprayer we're gonna take a look at in this video is the Lemmer RP460 HD. This is a $350 professional style sprayer. Starting down here at the bottom, it has a flexible coupler on the inlet, adjustable inlet regulator. You can adjust the airflow rate through the gun using this knob on the back. It does not have a adjustable product flow rate knob up here on the top like the Woolwax Supreme that we just looked at. So we'll get into this in a minute, but the fact that it does not adjust the amount of product that comes out is sort of a big deal. And taking a look at some of the other stuff that you have here. So it has a 2-stage trigger on it, just like the Woolwax sprayer that we looked at. In addition to that, it is also a pressure pot style sprayer. With that said, this sprayer actually has a check valve on the pressure pot. So when I release the trigger and unhook it from air, there's still pressure inside this container. Listen. So that's what I'm saying, guys, with the Woolwax Supreme sprayer. That's the main issue with it, is every time you release the trigger, it doesn't keep pressure in here. So when you hit the trigger a second time, as you guys saw on the demo, there's a delay. With this sprayer, you don't have that because there's pressure in here all the time. My main issue with this sprayer is, first of all, the price. And there's a couple other little nitpick things that I'm not really crazy about. So the opening on the can itself to fill it is extraordinarily small. So filling it can, if you're pouring the product in, can be a pain in the butt. You have to pretty much use a funnel. With that said, the threads on the can that thread into the gun actually, you know, feel like somebody that knew what they're doing machine those threads as opposed to the Woolwax gun. Overall, the biggest fundamental problem with this gun is really 2 things. It's weight. If you're going to hold it over your head for long periods of time, it is extraordinarily heavy. Second thing is there's no adjustable product flow rate, like I said. So when you change viscosities and you go from a thicker product to a thinner product, or vice versa, you cannot compensate for that viscosity change. The only thing you can do is try to adjust the air pressure and try to adjust the airflow rate through the gun. And from what I've found, I haven't been able to choke this gun down enough to get a good flow rate or a good spray pattern with lanolin. I've tried it multiple times with a fan tip. It just comes out like snot. It's very like splattery. It doesn't atomize the product very well. The only thing that I really use this sprayer for, believe it or not, is just inner cavities. So I use the inner cavity wand on it, and it clips into the end just like the Woolwax sprayer that we just talked about. And this is how I use it 99.9% of the time. To me, this is about the only thing it's really good for, which at $350, it's really hard for somebody to justify. There are some other wands that come with it. So it has a traditional 360 inner cavity wand, just like the Woolwax Pro gun for $100, that clips into the end, and you can get all the inner cavities and stuff with that. It also has like a smaller version of the inner cavity wand that I use. I mean, typically where you're gonna fit this one, typically where you're gonna fit this tip is where you're gonna fit this one. So overall, I don't see a huge advantage to using this. So 99.9% of the time, like I said, I have this wand hooked up in the end, set up like this, and this is how I use it. So overall, guys, for 350 bucks, it's too heavy, doesn't spray well, not enough adjustment on it, the opening's too small. Overall, for 350 bucks, there's absolutely no way as a DIYer that I would ever consider this. There's just too many compromises here compared to what you can get for a heck of a lot cheaper. So guys, taking a look at all these different sprayers I have here, really, as you guys have sort of seen at this point, you really want to fall into sort of the middle ground. You don't want something so cheap that you have no accessories for it, and you don't want to be so expensive that the performance really isn't any better than what these two are, in my opinion. If these two guns are dialed in how they're supposed to be, I can make them spray just as well as these two. And these two here are what, like 2.5 times cheaper than what this one is, 3.5 times cheaper than what this one is. So for 99.9% of the people out there, you want to fall into somewhere in the $60 to $120 neighborhood. You're going to have everything you need to be able to coat your car, and if you're thinking about spending more money on something this fancy, don't do it. Take that money and just use it and spend it on product. You're better off with product. If you take your time and you do a good job with either one of these two sprayers, you're going to get results like you would had you bought one of these two, and you're going to save, you know, roughly 2.5 times the cost. So if you're thinking about buying either one of these, don't do it. Just spend that money on product, in my opinion. There aren't huge benefits here over what these two are. So guys, with that said, I'll have links down in the description to all the spray guns that I had in this video. As always, guys, if you guys like the video, hit like. If you want to see more content, go down and hit subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys.